I'm very excited to be here. My name is Larry Habegger, and I am the executive editor of Traveler's Tales, the publisher of the Best Women's Travel Writing Series and other books. We've been doing this now for 27 years. We started in 1993 with our first book, and we're really proud of all the 150 plus books we've published, and especially proud of our most recent books, some of which I happen to have with me. French Like Moi, A Midwesterner in Paris by Scott Carpenter, came out just a few months ago. 100 Years of Exile, a Romanov's Search for Her Father's Russia by Tanya Romanov, who is in the audience tonight and has a story in the Best Women's Travel Writing Volume 12. And of course, the Best Women's Travel Writing Volume 12, edited by Lavinia Spalding, who is going to run the show tonight. So really proud of those books, and we're here to celebrate this, the publication launch of the Best Women's Travel Writing Volume 12. I also, before we go any farther, want to thank Book Passage. Book Passage is my favorite bookstore and champion of the Indies, and they're the sponsor of tonight's event with Traveler's Tales, and we really appreciate all the support Book Passage has given to us and given to the publishing community, the writing community. You all know how vital and important independent bookstores are. You also know, most of you, I'm sure, how vital and important Book Passage is and what it contributes to our community. I urge you to buy your books there, and I will be putting in the chat window periodically throughout the evening a link to the Best Women's Travel Writing and probably these other two books as well. So it'll be easy for you to find the book and purchase it at Book Passage. I want to thank everybody for coming. This is going to be a really good night, and we have a really big audience, which I'm thrilled about. And I truly appreciate the community of writers and readers who have come tonight and who are supporting this book, supporting these writers, and of course, supporting travel literature in general and Traveler's Tales in particular. Thank you very, very much. Tonight, Lavinia is going to run the show, and I'm sure she will have some eloquent words, and we'll have readings from the book and some Q&A at the end. So post your questions in the chat window. I'll monitor them throughout the night, and we'll cover as many questions as we can near the end of our time. We expect to run the program to run about an hour. And I just want to say that Lavinia, of course, is the editor of this collection. This happens to be the 6th one in a series of 12 that she has edited. And that means that she's edited exactly half of the collections in the Best Women's Travel Writing Series. I think that's just great. I've known and worked with her since we published her book, Writing Away. I think it was her first book in 2009. And not to mention that Lavinia and I have been faculty and karaoke partners in the Book Passage Travel Writers and Photographers Conference for many, many years. And as everyone knows who knows her, she's a kind, creative, funny, and inspiring presence and a brilliant writer and editor. Very quickly, a little more formal bio about Lavinia. She's the author of Writing Away and the co-author of With a Measure of Grace and This Immeasurable Place. And she introduced the ebook edition of Edith Wharton's classic travelogue, A Motor Flight Through France. Her stories appear in many major newspapers and magazines, and she is currently stumbling over packing boxes and children's toys as she and her family move into a new home in New Orleans. Lavinia, it's all yours. Take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Larry, for that sweet introduction. I will say that working with you and James over the last decade has been so much fun. And I just want to say that you two are incredible pioneers of women's travel writing. And I think I speak for a lot of us when I say we appreciate that. So looking out at all of you here tonight, it feels like such a celebration to me. I see so many faces I love, and it's also really a confirmation of something that I've always known to be true, and what Traveler's Tales has proven again and again, which is that women's stories are important. They matter. So one of the quotes that I chose for the beginning of the book is by Ursula Le Guin. And I'm going to read I'm going to read it. She says, "We are volcanoes. When we women offer our experience as our truth, as human truth, all the maps change. There are new mountains." So I want to invite you all to a changed map tonight, a map that was written by 34 amazing women, a new map we are really honored to include in this collection. So tonight's going to be fun. It might get a little messy at times with so many of us, but it's sort of intentionally that way. Larry and I talked a lot about how to host this event. We considered just doing a normal reading, although what's normal anymore? But a normal reading in which the audience can only see the readers and the readers can only see can't see the audience. And in the end, we realized no, because you're not just an audience, you're our community. And we want to recognize you too, because you're also important in the making of this map. If we make new maps and we have no one to walk them, no one to pay attention to them, then we never go anywhere new. So thank you so much for coming tonight. It's really an incredible honor to edit these books. And like Larry said, there are 6 that I didn't edit. And I want to shout out to Stephanie Elizondo Grease, who edited the one before me, and Lucy McCauley, who edited the first 5, because I learned so much from them and what they did. And all the collections are wonderful and different. And I love all 12. And they make great stocking stuffers or Hanukkah gifts or any kind of gift. But this book, for me, was a little special and different. First of all, because we were incredibly fortunate to rope one of our contributors into illustrating it. So I want to talk a little bit about our illustrator. I first met Colette Hannahan in San Francisco through a class at the Writers Grotto. And we learned that we lived just a couple blocks apart. And so we started taking the bus home together. And since then, she has been someone I regularly rely on for wisdom and laughter and inspiration. And I'm a huge fan of both her writing and her artwork. And I don't actually think that Colette knew how much work she was signing up for when she said yes to this. But she created 35 original paintings to accompany all of the stories. And it really, I don't know, I think it makes the book so much more special. And maybe we could, Larry, maybe you could put her website, ColetteHannahan.com, in the chat so people can see the full color versions, because they're black and white in the book. But Colette, I'm wondering if you would like to say a few words about the process of illustrating the book. Colette Hannahan.
Hello, everybody. What a great intro, Lavinia. Oh my God. First of all, I want to thank Larry, James, Lavinia, Howie for an incredible experience. And I mean, this has just been a dream project over the pandemic. I think I was in 3 quarantines over this time, and for 1 month I was alone. So this was incredible to wake up every morning and have a beautiful, inspiring, heart exploding story full of natural beauty and heart connection, and by these courageous women. So, and then I would get to paint a scene from one of their stories. So it got me through. And I always think of Cheryl Strayed for many reasons. I mean, probably many of us love her too, but she always talked about how her mom, Bobby, would tell her to put herself in the way of beauty. And so in the tough moments over the pandemic, I would tell myself this, and this project kind of threw me into the way of beauty with all these beautiful stories. and these wonderful women, and Lavinia, Larry, James, and Howie. So thank you for everything. It's been incredible. A total pleasure.
Thank you. Let's all give her a little hand. So thank you, Colette, for all the beauty that you put into these pages. So the second reason that this book is so special to me is that a lot of it was created during a quarantine, obviously, also, with borders closed. I was supposed to be going to Colombia for my 50th birthday with my best friend, Erin, who's probably on this call, I'm not sure. And I had intended to write about that trip for the introduction, but of course the trip was canceled. And I didn't really think I should write about my dinner in the backyard with my family, as lovely as that was. So I wrote about going to Fez, Morocco, and the feeling of being utterly lost there in the Medina. For those of you who have been to the Fez Medina, you have undoubtedly experienced this same feeling. And I also just ended up writing about feeling lost because of the pandemic. So I'm going to read just a few paragraphs of my intro. Larry, I don't know if you want to put the little spotlight thing on me again, but you're welcome to. So my intro, the beginning of it starts with me sort of just talking about being lost. I'm going to jump in a bit into the beginning and jump around a little bit. So the Medina was a clogged, chaotic blur, an ever-swirling kaleidoscope of color and sound and scent. And while mesmerized, I tried hard to keep my bearings. I didn't stand a chance. I got lost every 2 minutes. Anytime I unbolted the heavy door of my riad and stepped outside, or exited a cafe, or craned my neck to gaze at a thin bookmark of blue sky above the peeling paint of an orange wall. Finally, I received some advice. Let yourself get lost, a friend said. You're supposed to get lost. And when I no longer wish to be lost, ask a woman for directions. Women won't steer you wrong. In the days that followed, I surrendered to the labyrinth, turning this way and that, wholly absorbed. I meandered through shops stocked with dainty glass teacups, ankle-length halabas, and tall, tidy cones of saffron and cinnamon. I admired brass lamps the size of umbrellas. I don't know why. And touched, umbrellas, and touched the soft purses dyed Pepto pink and parakeet green. I watched craftsmen weave linens on giant hand-operated wooden looms, ate chabakia, sesame honey rose water cookies, and held mint to my nose at the phenomenally pungent 11th century Chihuahua tannery. I whispered Buddhist prayers for caged chickens, live snails, and a camel head hanging from a hook. Then, when I tired of being directionless, I asked a woman for directions. And somehow, with women pointing the way felt more familiar. This wisdom of both leaning into lostness and seeking guidance from women was still on my mind 6 months later when I began work on the Best Women's Travel Writing, Volume 12, and faced 1,300 submissions, 800 more than usual. And it's on my mind now because the truth is, attempting to pen an introduction about travel today in the midst of a global pandemic during which our passports lie fallow, in an era of climate change and catastrophic natural disasters, and at the dawn of a 400 years overdue revolution brought on by systemic racial injustice, I have never felt more lost as a writer. Let yourself get lost. You're supposed to get lost. And when I no longer wish to be lost, ask a woman for directions. Women won't steer you wrong. This book marks the 12th volume of the Best Women's Travel Writing series and the 6th I've edited. Over the years, I've occasionally been asked, what is women's travel writing and why is it different or special? I never quite nail the answer. It's complex, but I do know that in meandering through women's essays, I always seem to trip across something I'm not even aware I'm seeking, but vitally need. These some things run the gamut from escape to inspiration, to connection to catharsis, and always lodged sturdily in there among everything else is the truth. I always find truth, or more accurately, I am guided to it. So that's all I'm going to read from that. There's a lot more. And I'm going to now turn it over to all of the beautiful, amazing women who made this book possible. We have 24 of the 34 contributors here tonight, and we'll be briefly hearing from all of them. So 20 of them, this is where it might get a little messy, but bear with us. 20 of them will be introducing themselves, unmuting themselves, introducing themselves, and then giving you just the tiniest hint of what their stories are about. And the other 4 will read a good-sized chunk of their essays. And so now I have the pleasure of turning the mic over to our 24 contributors. It's basically alphabetical order, but I'm starting with Allison Singh G.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Allison Singh G. My Chinese American ancestors have been visiting Yosemite for the past century. Did you know the Chinese built the roads that lead to the giant redwoods? For me, it was my bipolar father who paved my way to Yosemite. My story is Half Dome. It was a place that accepted us for who we are. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marilyn Abelskov. I contributed an essay called In the Presence of Boys, and it's set in Matsumoto, Japan. Great to be here tonight. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Faith Adiele. My story takes place in Finland, Sweden, and on a boat in between. It's called A Family Project, and it chronicles a Nigerian Nordic girl's homecoming.
Hi, my name is Christina Ammon, and my story takes place in the little village of Avila, Spain. It's called Convivencia, and it's a story about saints, rebels, nihilism, faith, and friendship.
Hi, my name is Jen Balko, and my story takes place on a small road in Azerbaijan. It's called Meeting Joy, and it's about walking 2 continents, 10,000 miles, finding coins, grapes, and kindness.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Barker Davis. My story takes place on Mount Merapi, a volcano in Indonesia. It's called Come and See, and it asks the question, is it disaster tourism if you're invited?
Hello, everyone. I am Sivani Babu, and I'm actually going to read a little bit of my story. It's titled The House on KBR Swami Road. It's a story I wrote about visiting my grandparents' home as a child in India, and their home was in India. I was not as a child. And I'm going to skip around a lot. I'm starting in the middle, so the only thing you really need to know is that my grandparents have passed. So when I have scenes with my grandfather, they're happening when I'm a child. The house on KBR Swami Road didn't look like a house, at least not like the houses I knew. I was a child of California's Central Coast. Aside from the homes of my friends, which were a lot like my own, the only house I really knew was the stucco structure with the red tiled roof and fruit trees in the yard, where the scent of the Pacific lingered on a westerly breeze. The floors were carpeted, my bedroom walls papered with delicate purple butterflies and posters of Magic Johnson, and the only people who lived there were my parents, my siblings, and me. But the house on KBR Swami Road was different. It was actually 3 concrete whitewashed houses bought over several years. The individual buildings were connected on the lower levels in certain places, But by the third story, the top, the buildings were separate. The ground floor held my grandfather's print shop, and the family, immediate and extended, lived in the 62 rooms above, sharing one kitchen, one dining room, and a handful of squatty potties. After marrying my mom, my dad jokingly started calling the house Kotaval Chavdi, after the famous wholesale vegetable market that supplied produce to millions of people in Madras. The house was always bursting with people, not just family, but also friends, employees, and business associates. No one ever knew who was supposed to be in the house and who wasn't, so the assumption was that everyone belonged. Anybody could wander in off the street, and as long as they didn't act shifty, they'd be served a full meal and treated like the old friend they just might be. The whirs, bangs, and whooshes of the enormous printing presses reverberated off the concrete walls. I sat with Thatha in his office as he worked, the scent of tobacco and cloves drifting from his clothes. I'd made a habit of throwing out his cigarettes when he wasn't looking. "You shouldn't smoke," I would say to him, filled with the indignance of a child. "Aunama, yes, Mom," he would reply, smiling, his glimmering eyes framed by the thick black rims of his glasses. He never got angry and never complained, but he didn't quit either. I'd been his tiny shadow all day long, splashing around as he filled barrels in the morning when the water came on for an hour, following him as he introduced me, his granddaughter from America, to some of the shop owners next door, sitting across from him as he taught me to play chess, and tagging along as he went down to the print shop. Kalahasti Thumarao and Sons had been in the book publishing business since 1882. Thatha and his brother inherited the business from their father, and in the 1940s, as India moved toward independence, the family had taken great risks to print and distribute contraband pro-independence literature. As the story went, they printed the contraband in broad daylight, and at night, caught up on their normal publishing jobs. Even more surprising than the brazenness of the plan of the operation was its success. The British only ever became suspicious at night, and their nighttime raids proved fruitless. A history of revolution was fine and good, but at 6 years old, I just wanted to play with the printing presses. And even when he should have, Thatha never really said no to me. Now, as an adult, I'm back in the house, still trying to get my bearings. Where was the kitchen and the store where we heated water for our early morning bucket baths? Where was the dining room where I begged to sit on the floor and eat with the adults? Where was the print shop in Thatha's office? I asked Thumarao Uncle, one of my mom's 5 brothers. It is no more. I know what that means. The print shop was destroyed several years ago when the government demolished part of the building to widen the street. It was well past bedtime for me and the other children. The town had grown dark, and all of the oil lamps in the house had been extinguished. We'd while the hours away, playing cards and carom, laughter filling the night. Thatha had set up a row of cots on the terrace for all of the kids, and I climbed into mine. Blanketed by the sweet scent of jasmine and camphor, I counted shooting stars, wishing on each of them as they passed overhead until I fell asleep. Where was the terrace? I asked my mom, who in turn asks her brother. I am desperate after all these years to find something that feels familiar, and so many memories are tied to that terrace. I look hopefully at my uncle, and he gives me the head nod, the one that simultaneously combines the nod for yes with a shake for no and means whatever you want it to mean. I would laugh, except I need to know the answer. No, he finally says, it is gone. You can see where it was from the roof, but we cannot go up. It is locked. My uncle explains that they no longer have access to that part of the house. It doesn't belong to them anymore. After my grandparents died, it passed to a member of the extended family who keeps it locked and keeps people out. I sigh and look at my hands in my lap. Ishwarao, my youngest uncle, stands abruptly and leaves the room. I wonder where he's going, but I sit and listen as the conversation moves on and then dies. This silence, too, is unfamiliar. Why had I thought that after nearly 2 decades, this place would be the same? When he returns to the room, Ishwarao Uncle has a key in his hand. Come with me, he says. I stand and follow him up a narrow staircase. As we near the top, the staircase turns and there's a drop in the ceiling. Watcher, he starts to say, but he's too late. I smack my head against the concrete, stumbling as bright golden dots swarm my vision like bumblebees. I blink a few times, then reach up and rub my forehead, pleased to see my hand come away with only a dusting of chalky whitewash rather than a smear of blood. I never had to duck as a kid. Israel uncle cringes and hisses, "Are you okay?" I am, and we keep going. I follow him up the remainder of the stairs and then down a walkway past more closed doors. Something is nagging at me. We reach another door, and I watch silently as he slips the key into the heavy metal padlock. Something is still bugging me. We step out onto the roof. There, he points. When I follow his gaze, I find a brand new building, one I've never seen before. The key is still dangling in Israel uncle's hand, and I finally realize what's been bothering me. The doors. There are no doors in my memories of the house on KBR Swami Road. They were there, I'm sure, but no one ever closed them, and so it was as if they didn't exist. The closed doors came later, after Thatha, the last of the family's true patriarchs, died, after Kalahasti Thammarao and sons fractured and splintered, after the buildings were divided among quarreling extended family members, and after the government demolished so much of the home to widen the road below. That was the final blow. They sheared off half of the house and left the building unfinished, half-destroyed rooms open to the street, allowing the memories to escape until they were gone, just like the terrace where I once slept under a canvas of night that smoldered with embers from millions of miles ago. How, I wondered, could there be nothing left? I want to cry. I want to hug Thatha. Will you come to our home? The voice surprises me. And that's where I'll stop.
Oh, Sivani, that was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm Erin Byrne. My story, Our Ravaged Lady, takes place in Paris, where Notre Dame Cathedral and my life caught fire.
Hi, I'm Ann Beatty, and my story takes place in Nepal. It's called You Don't Have to Be Here, and it's about the danger of too much safety.
Is Anita here? Anita Cabrera? She might not be here. Let's move on to Marcia.
I'm Marcia DeSanctis. My story is called Headlights, and it's about being stranded alone in the darkness, in the rain in Mont Saint-Michel, France.
Hi, I'm Audrey Ferber, and my essay is called A Daughter's Guide to Florence. And it's the story of a woman who finally, 15 years after her mother's death, keeps her promise to visit the city her mother loved.
Naomi, you're up next.
Hi, can you guys hear me? I'm Naomi Melati Bishop. My story takes place all around the world. It's called Stolen Tickets. It's about my father's journey around the world with his then girlfriend, Uta. It's also the story of how my parents met. And the teaser is Chasing Truths and Spreading Ashes. And I'll be reading from my story tonight. Dad created myths and lived them. He'd take me on 3 a.m. walks in strange cities and tell me wild stories about how he helped overthrow the Suharto regime, how he was blacklisted in Indonesia, how my mother's death when I was 7 years old was a possible murder plotted by the regime. And that's why we had to sleep with a baseball bat under our pillow. But recently I learned this. Gordon, also known as Dad, and his ex-girlfriend Uta, a countess and a model, traveled the world on stolen plane tickets. If it weren't for these stolen tickets and the journey they took him on, I wouldn't exist. He told me about all of his adventures, including the crime of the stolen tickets, again and again like bedtime stories, though I'm aware that just because his self-fulfilling folktales were vivid doesn't mean that they were necessarily accurate. I gathered them from the memory bank he shared, as well as from the journals and photos he left behind. I spent the years since my father's death traveling across the world, chasing truths about his life and spreading his ashes. That was his dying wish, for me to deliver him across oceans and continents, smack dab in the heart of every city, every beach, and every memory. The stolen plane tickets arrived on a rainy summer evening in 1971, when a Black Panther showed up at his doorstep in Berkeley, drenched and desperate for a place to hide. A gun was tucked inside the sleeve of his leather jacket. Gordon invited him in for coffee and a joint. "Can I crash here?" the Black Panther asked. "Sure, man, you got money to chip in?" Gordon asked. "I've got something better than money," the Black Panther said. He drew a lockbox from his wet backpack. Inside were 60, 90, maybe 100 sets of blank airline tickets. "So-and-so's friend works for Qantas. She brought these home," he explained. "These are good for getting you anywhere in the world. You go to the airport and you have the agent write out the ticket, one destination at a time. But you can't stay longer than 3 weeks. You have fun, you lose track of time. If that happens, tear up the first pack and start over with a fresh pack. But don't let anyone catch on. You see, these tickets are..." "I catch your drift," Gordon said. "Take as many as you'd like, but be careful, man. That's how folks end up having 3 babies in each continent. Gordon smirked, snatched 4 blank ticket books, and built a makeshift bed for his new guests in the walk-in closet. He spun a globe he kept to watch where his finger would land, a nightly routine that calmed his frenetic thoughts. "Let's run away," his girlfriend Uta said shortly after my dad received the tickets. "Somewhere new, somewhere far and exotic." So my father and Uta zigzagged across nations and time zones and cultures. Gordon's charm and Uta's regal beauty opened doors. Together, they befriended royalty, politicos, artists, businessmen, shamans, and indigenous folks around the world. On the stolen tickets, they'd eventually hop to France, Italy, Mexico, Australia, Tahiti, Fiji, Nepal, Brazil, Afghanistan, Singapore, and Indonesia. At each destination, Gordon would buy a small souvenir and slip it into his pale green attaché case, which he eventually gave me. At LAX in 1971, prepared for their first journey, my father let Uta do all of the talking while he hid. Uta wore a floor-length cream dress and hoop earrings. She spoke to the agents without hesitation. Her English, tinged with French and German overtones, made her seem worldly, and she was quick on her feet, handy traits for negotiating at international airports. Meanwhile, my father, with his long hair and blue eyeshadow, which he wore almost daily, hid in a kiosk, sweating profusely, in a velvet bell-bottom tuxedo and cowboy boots, one gold and the other silver. "The next flight to Paris is in 6 hours, the agent said, handing Uta 2 tickets. "You're a sorceress," Gordon said to his partner, "just like all the other fairy tale witches from the Black Forest." They made it through security without raising an eyebrow and shared a high from the rush of not getting bagged. On board the plane, they ordered champagne and toasted to Utsarella and Gordon Zola. Now I'm gonna jump forward. So basically what happened is my father and Uta went around the world on these stolen plane tickets. They almost got caught, and then they break up and my dad ends up in Yogyakarta. And here's where I pick up. In 1974, Gordon found himself in the midst of Indonesia's Independence Day parade in Yogyakarta. He was surrounded by thousands of villagers who gaped at him from afar, who inched closer to touch his white skin or else gasped as they watched him eat a chicken skewer with his left hand, the devil's hand. A group of dancers unfolded their limbs like petals. Gamelan music vibrated, gongs sounded. Skinny horses and wizened men sat lazily in park pedicabs, bare and filthy feet peeking out from batik sarongs. Teenagers jammed to Bob Dylan. Sultans were hoisted above the crowd in gilded carriages. People shouted, "Merdeka, independence." Gordon heard a laugh like wind chimes. He followed the sound to a woman with smiling red-stained lips in a hip-hugging mini dress. A sight far too modern and incongruous in a city renowned as the heart of traditional Javanese culture, where many women including the one accompanying her, resisted Western influence by continuing to wear classic batik sarongs and lace blouses. A purple orchid was pinned to the brazenly dressed woman's hair. Her cheekbones were high. She was a ghost of a woman whose force was so overpowering that looking at her turned him on, but also kind of hurt him. She was strolling arm in arm with another woman who was carrying a baby in a batik sling. They walked toward each other, standing inches apart for the few moments their paths intersected. Sweat beads trailed Gordon's brows. His hands shook. She turned her gaze toward him. Their eyes locked. She blushed, but didn't look away. The loquacious and never shy Gordon stood transfixed and mute as they flirted with their eyes for pregnant minutes. All of the pickup lines he had ever used, and some he hadn't, flashed through his mind, but none seemed appropriate, especially after translating them into his far from fluent Indonesian. When he got up the nerve to introduce himself, he was so tongue-tied he couldn't speak. Instead, he went to buy loose cigarettes at a nearby kiosk. From the corner of his eye, he saw her leaving the parade. He sped after her, elbowing people, but she vanished into the crowd. For the next 34 days, Gordon waited where his roommate Jono thought he had seen her, atop the highest perch of Taman Sari Castle, now ruins, his legs and binoculars dangling high above Yogyakarta's bustling bird market. Word spread about the foreigner in the watchtower looking for love. Curious kids joined him. Others came and brought him daily offerings of magic love potions made of reptile blood and minced ginger, which he drank happily and hopefully. Several times he thought he saw her, mounted his bike and pedaled off in hot pursuit with his heart thumping a mile a minute, only to find out it was someone else. Rainy season came and left. It was 1975 and my father had been in Yogyakarta for 2 years, roughly 4 years since his trip with Uta had first begun. He walked along a quiet lane during sunset, his head hung low. His thoughts wandered to life in New York City. His parents had offered to pay for the 10,000-mile journey home. Penniless and heartbroken, he weighed this option. He had $1 for a hot dog from Ray's Papaya, a cheesecake from Carnegie Deli, a midnight subway ride. Gordon looked up. At that moment, he spotted a familiar woman. He took out his binoculars. To his astonishment, it was the other woman from the parade who was accompanying his love, with the same baby slung onto her hip, only now doubled in size. He ran up the staircase panting. The woman gasped. A look of shock struck her lips, which quickly morphed into a smile. "You're that foreigner from the Merdeka parade," she said immediately. Gordon was surprised she remembered. This gave him a boost. "We thought you were just passing through like most white guys. Ulays," she said. "Please," Gordon begged, lapsing into his unpolished way. "Give me her address." "I can't," she said. But then she took out a pencil and a pink receipt and began to scribble. "Here, Nanis," it read. "If you love her enough, you will find her." He liked this game. Thanks for listening, guys.
Wow, that was amazing to hear. It's lovely to travel around the world when we're all stuck at home. And from the chat alone, I think everyone wants those stolen tickets. So my name's Shannon Leon Fowler, and my story takes place just outside of Killarney in the Gap of Dunlow in Ireland. It's called A Rare Colored Stone, and it's about a storm, a few pints of Guinness, an amateur autopsy, and Irish luck.
Hi, everybody. I'm Colette. My story is called Call of the Sirens, and it's about a time when I sold a ton of knives, went to Europe, and got into the back of a windowless van with strangers.
Diane, are you here?
Yeah, hi. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you to Larry and Traveler's Tales and Lavinia. And being in this anthology is really special to me because decades ago, I taught college for 35 years. And in my earliest times, you didn't include women in the curriculum. So I was kind of the pioneer warrior to get women's literature and women's studies going. So it warms my heart to see whole anthologies now, of course, and it's taken as a normal thing, which back then most of my faculty thought I was a radical for it. My story takes place during when the Berlin Wall was coming down in Europe, and I was in Eastern Europe traveling around, and I get on a train and travel from Prague to the south of Italy, and my story is called A Bedtime Story. And while I'm on that train, I get chloroformed in the middle of the night and robbed, and eventually propositioned. But I finally do make it south, and all ends pretty well. So thank you.
Jacqueline?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Lavinia, for including me in this particular edition of the Best Women's Travel Writing. My story takes place in San Miguel de Allende. It was my first trip there, my first trip in a long time traveling alone. And there in San Miguel, I discovered some unexpected answers to some really life-changing questions. That's it.
Hi, I am Martha McCulley, and first of all, I wanted to give a shout out to my dear oldest friend, Marcia DeSanctis, who introduced me to the wonderful Lavinia. Thank you so much, Marty. And my story takes place at the 19 destination weddings I've been to as a single person. And the name of it is Save the Date: The Very Special Joy of Traveling the World to Witness the Matrimonial Bliss of Others.
Hi, I'm Eva Holland. I really hope my connection is going to hold up. Bear with me, I'm pretty remote here. My story is called A Strange Ambition, and I'm going to read the beginning, and then if I'm still with you all, a couple more little snippets. Am I coming through okay so far?
So far, so good.
I can't tell if anybody can hear me.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
We hear you, Eva.
Okay. Before she climbed on her snowmobile and drove away, leaving us to the ice, Sarah had a few parting words. "Don't burn the tent down," she said, hugging all of us hard. "Don't lose each other." She pulled away and headed to her machine. Soon its red taillight receded in the distance, veering right and left as she steered along the ocean's rough, frozen skin. A cold wind blew at our backs as we watched her go. The hum of the machine vanished almost immediately. We three people, who had met just a few days earlier, were alone on the sea ice of Frobisher Bay, on the east coast of Canada's Baffin Island, 2.5 degrees south of the Arctic Circle. Erliani, a chatty, high-energy ex-diplomat from Singapore, broke the quiet. "This is weird, no?" Jonathan, a ponytailed Dane who could have been cast as one of the rugged men of Rohan in Lord of the Rings, was stoic. "Not really," he said. I didn't say anything at all, just watched the snowmobile shrink to a dark blur before finally vanishing into the white. Until this moment, I hadn't quite believed Sarah would really leave us out here. We weren't ready, I'd figured she would say. We weren't strong enough. My excitement arm wrestled with fear and dread. For the past 3 days, Sarah had led us out across the ice from her home in Iqaluit, the capital of Nunavut, the largest and northernmost territory in Canada. For a week before that, she and her mother, Maddie, had attempted to cram our brains full of information about how to travel in the polar regions under our own steam and survive. Now Jonathan, Lynn, and I had 72 hours to find our way back to town. To get there, we'd have to ski across the ice in harnesses, towing heavy pulks, fancy sleds, basically, loaded with all the gear we needed to stay alive in extreme cold. We'd have to navigate using all the tools at our disposal. We'd melt snow for water, pitch our tent in gale force gusts, eat and sleep and ski and piss and shit in temperatures as low as -40 Fahrenheit. And we'd do it all while dodging dehydration, frostbite, hypothermia, injury, navigational error, loss of critical gear, fuel spills, a tent fire, and a good old-fashioned societal breakdown in our civilization of 3. This was the final test. We were students in the 2-week extreme polar training course offered each year by Northwinds Expeditions, the Iqaluit-based guiding outfit that Maddie McNair founded and ran for more than 25 years. Her daughter, Sarah McNair Landry, had recently taken over the business. Between the two of them, they knew everything there was to know about traveling over ice in both the Arctic and Antarctic. We had come to Iqaluit to soak up wisdom from the best, and now we would find out how well we had learned. Just jumping ahead now. The history of polar exploration is a story of pain. White men, many of them British, battered their way through or across the ice that covers the top and bottom of the world in a parade of frostbite and scurvy. They froze, they starved. For the most part, they ignored the accumulated knowledge of the indigenous peoples they met in the Arctic. Instead, they ate their dogs, their shoes, and sometimes each other. Perversely, the hardships endured by the earlier expeditions inspired those who came later. Roald Amundsen, the great Norwegian explorer, wrote in a memoir that his polar dreams were cemented when he read a chronicle of an earlier Arctic attempt. The element that most caught his imagination, Amundsen said of his teenage self, was the suffering the men endured. A strange ambition burned within me to endure those same sufferings, he wrote. This urge to fling yourself into a sufferfest and come out the other side still animates plenty of people. But my expectation upon arrival in Iqaluit, that I was about to endure 2 weeks of relentless discomfort, was misplaced. It turns out the McNairs don't traffic in suffering for its own sake. And this last little bit goes backwards in time to the start of the course. Sorry, scrolling. I'm lost in the PDF. I'm sorry, Lavinia. Here we go. The McNair's secret, oddly enough, is to have fun. To thrive, Maddie believes, you have to find the beauty and wonder in polar travel instead of dwelling on the obstacles and suffering. She and Sarah teach a sequence of interlocking systems intended to prevent any enduring of hardships or eating of boots. Just one of a dozen examples. Maddie designed and sews her own Velcro-sealed snack packs for use during a day's travel, with wide openings and beefy pull tabs. That means you can shove your ration of frozen bacon and cheese and chocolate into your mouth without removing your bulky overgloves and exposing your hands to near instant frost nip. That first night on the ice, once I made it into my layered sleeping bags, I was shocked to feel cozy and warm. As I settled in for sleep, I felt hope for the first time that there might be more to polar travel than fear and misery. But the night still seemed deadly. The tent thrashed around in a heavy wind, the huskies chained nearby howled, and the ice creaked and boomed as it shifted in the grip of the tide. I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks.
These are such good stories. These are just such good stories. It's wonderful. My name is Toni Mirosevic. My story happens in the middle of the Adriatic Sea while my wife and I are going to Croatia, where my grandparents are from. A sea storm happens, and my wife says the one thing that you don't want to hear is this it.
Toni, I loved your story. I'm Suzanne Roberts, and my story, Wing Mom, takes place in Greece, and it's about my mother trying to play matchmaker in Santorini.
Hi, I'm Jill Robinson. My story, called Tracking a Ghost, takes place in Ladakh, India, And it's about trekking in the Himalayas in the dead of winter to find an elusive animal.
Hi, I'm Ann Sigmund. My story, called Good Enough, takes place on Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. I, a non-athlete who's never climbed much of anything, explore how high I must climb to find myself.
Hi, my name is Alia. I'm so happy to be here. And this is just, oh my God, I just feel lifted out of my office. This is really delightful. Thank you so much, Lavinia, for working so hard on this event. And the anthology is just beautiful. And thank you, Larry, and Book Passage, one of my favorites. Okay. So I'm going to read from my piece. I think all you need to know about this is that I was a student in Cuba for a year in the early 2000s, and this is a return trip where I'm trying to sort out some damage that I feel I caused. It's called Finding El Sais. We head west out of Havana in the early afternoon. My husband, Kevin, behind the wheel of our circa 1990 rented Geely sedan. The air feels like the inside of a mouth, and even though third gear sounds like an opera singer warming up, and the stereo doesn't work, we're grateful for air conditioning. The highway winds through coastal Artemisa, a tranquil verdant province of farmland and gleaming seascapes. Exquisite scenery. But I have an ulterior motive for returning. I've come to settle an old debt. I last saw the man I seek 13 years ago, as I rode away from the town of Valle Honda in a Volkswagen Kombi packed with agricultural workers. He raised one hand in an open-palmed goodbye. The truck rounded a corner and I lost sight of him. There's no reason to think he's still in Valle Honda, except that it's the kind of town where people live from birth until death, a place where no one is a stranger. Except me, I was a stranger. I have forgotten this man's name in the intervening years. I remember a one-room shack with a dirt floor and an outdoor kitchen, no plumbing. The exterior may have been robin's egg blue. He didn't have a telephone, much less email, and I never wrote down the home address. For the longest time, I had a photograph of him and his wife sitting on a plank bench, regarding the camera with frank, unsmiling expressions. Her hand rested casually on his knee. I'd planned to use this snapshot to ask around town like they do in movies, have you seen this man? But though I ransacked my house before leaving California, the photo seemed to have vanished. So I'm looking for a memory, a wispy one. I have two specific details. He is unusually tall, and he used to play volleyball for the Cuban national team. You know, your chances of finding this guy are basically nil, right? Kevin says. If it doesn't work out, we'll move on. I figure I can count on an hour of Kevin's patience if we catch a lead, or half an hour if we don't. Out here in the boonies, we share the road with horse-drawn carts, tractors, dirt bikes, wobbling under 3 or 4 people, wandering livestock, and potholes the size of open graves. That much abused "why did the chicken cross the road" joke takes on new life as one seemingly suicidal chicken after another darts perilously in front of the car. Kevin grips the wheel, his red pharaoh beard jutting forward with concentration as he swerves around them. We travel with an endless rotation of hitchhikers in the backseat, mothers with small children, students returning from school, laborers heading home from work. Some ride for dozens of kilometers, some for a couple minutes. On an island where few people own cars, this is public transportation. Locals are expected, sometimes legally required, to stop for hitchhikers. Tourists aren't obligated, but if your car isn't at capacity, you're basically a jerk. Besides, the road maps are so lousy that driving anywhere beside the Carretera Central, you need directions, and we are way off the map. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. One of our hitchhikers says he knows who I'm looking for. It's a guy named El Saiz, or that's his nickname. And he supposedly hangs out at the kiosk in town. The kiosk is a crumbling cinder block store, shelves bare, save for a meager selection of knockoff sodas and beer, doughy street pizza, and botulism sandwiches. Clearly a hangout. Men drape themselves languidly on the front steps or stand in loose groups, laughing, smoking, holding up the walls. When we exit the Gili, people pause to give us the once over. Kevin and I are both pale redheads. My long red curls match his beard. We're obviously foreign. ¿Dónde anda el SAE? The medical student asked the group. Estos yanquis lo buscan. There's a confused chorus of Yankees looking for El Saiz? Why? Yo sé dónde está. One guy booms from the steps. He saunters over. I always know what he's up to. I'm his best friend. I explain that I knew El Saiz 13 years ago and wanted to see him. En serio? He climbs into the Geely's back seat without waiting for an invitation. Vámonos. Our new passenger wears a baseball cap with the brim flipped up, plastic sandals, board shorts, and a tank top, his arm muscles bulging. He introduces himself as Tabaco. You must smoke a lot, I laugh. Only when I was a little kid, he grins. Before the day's end, Kevin and I will watch Tabaco burn through 3 packs of cigarettes. He guides us through town to a manicured park with rows of giant banyan trees, their large rubbery leaves clacking in the breeze. Oye, El Saiz, Tobacco hollers out of the window. A man stands from a white marble bench. He is indeed tall, maybe 5'6", dressed entirely in white. His skin and eyes are a rich chestnut brown, and his hair is beginning to gray. He wears a quizzical expression. In my memory, the guy was more lanky, more of a string bean. This man has a bit of a paunch. I'd expected to recognize him, but now I feel uncertain. It's been too long. I plunge ahead anyway, hoping I won't make us both feel foolish. I was here a long time ago, I say. I stayed in your home. Remember that? His face is impassive. He regards me for what feels like a long time, betraying no recognition. Then he says, very quietly, I never thought you'd come back. And that's all I have time for. Thank you so much. This is really a treat.
Thank you, Alia. Larry Habegger, where are you?
I'm here, Lavinia. I'm here. I'm on the edge of my seat. What do you expect? Marvelous stuff.
Do you want to unmute everyone quickly so we can hear all our readers?
I'm going to ask everybody to unmute, and you may have to do it yourself. I don't know if my little toggle works. Let's give a round of applause for our leaders. Oh, hello.
That was fun.
Okay, so I'm not gonna mute anybody now, but this might get a little crazy. Lavinia, do you have any parting words? We have a few questions, not many, and we're at 7:05. So I think we can take a couple of questions, or what do you think, Lavinia?
I have no parting words. I don't think so. I'm so happy to see all of you here, and it has just really moved me and made me so happy to see you all here. And thank you for your beautiful stories. And Larry, thank you so much for putting it together. And cheers.
Well, cheers to you, Lavinia. It wouldn't be here without you, and this whole event wouldn't have run without you. You are the star, you're the show, you're the reason we're all here gathering, and you are, you are.
No way, man, it's the stories and the writers.
Yeah, there is that, yes. So the other 34 contributors, absolutely. That does lead me to a surprise question I want to throw at you before we sign off. You said there were something like, what, 1,500 submissions for this particular edition? Are there any stories? Are there any stories that did not make it into the collection that have left you second guessing yourself?
No, there are not any stories. There are about there are hundreds. There are always hundreds. Let me just
I'm going to mute everybody and bring you back. Okay, Lavinia, you're muted.
So there are hundreds of stories that I loved, and it's always a lot like Tetris. I can't have 9 Paris stories in one collection, and I can't have 9 stories about traveling and grieving loss, and I can't have more than one story from one writer. And so it's always, it was either you or James who told me early on that it's a lot like making a mixtape, is what you guys said. I would say a mixtape or a playlist. And so you can't have all Bon Jovi. You can't have, all.
It's akin to composing music too. You need to put together the theme and the coda, and you need to work with the various stories and build a melody and wrap it up just in the right way. So you've done a marvelous job on all these books over the years, and we really appreciate everything that you've brought to Traveler's Tales and to the world of travel writing. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
There was one other question which was directed to me, and I'll do it very quickly. A question about the original publications of the best travel writing and the best women's travel writing. Originally, we did them annually, and we focused for them very much on stories from the previous year. And the question was, when did that change and why? It changed quite a few years ago, and the reason being that we had so many good stories, like Lavinia is talking about, so many good stories that would come in from one year, but we couldn't fit them into that edition, and we wanted to use them in another book. So we would hold on to them for 2, 3, 4, 5 years sometimes, and then find the spot for them. Of course, the writers would be mystified that 5 years later they get a message from us saying, we want to publish this story now. And anyway, better late than never, I guess. But that's the reason, and it seems to have worked pretty well for us. So I don't have any parting words either, except to say thank you to everybody for being here. Thank you once again to Book Passage for sponsoring this event. Thank you to all of the contributors who brought their marvelous stories to this book, and to Lavinia again for putting it all together. And now to having a book out in the world, and to anybody who is interested, getting the book, giving it to you as gifts, and helping spread the word. And in this time of COVID, thank you for sharing some of your evening with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything else, Lavinia?
I don't think so.
Shall we sign
Cheers.
off? Cheers.
I guess.
Thank you so much.
I don't think my glass of
Oh, and
water is going to
Tanya,
be.
you're here.
Tanya, you must have left and come back.
Yep.
We have
Tanya
another
Tanya has another event this evening, if I'm not mistaken, for her book being translated into Russian. Is that not right, Tanya?
Yes.
This is not the Russian edition. This is the U.S. edition.
But if you need the Russian edition, let me know.
All right, very
This
good.
was great. Thank you, Larry.
Yes, thank you, everybody. So, Lavinia, shall we just sign off?
Thanks for coming, everyone. It was so great to see you all. And
Thank you.
Okay, very good. I'm going to sign off. I'm going to shut down the meeting. Good night, all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.